Prime Minister looked them in the eye and promised he would protect their jobs, that he would negotiate a win, and I quote, have a deal by July 21st, but it was a bait and switch that is costing people their livelihoods.
Our thoughts are with the workers affected by the unjustified and unjustifiable tariffs. We absolutely have every confidence in the Algoma workers as they're going through this hardship, and we will make sure that we support them.
Debate in the House of Commons after Algoma Steel announced it's cutting a third of its workforce in Sault Ste. Marie. The feds in Ontario have put up $500 million in loans to help the company adapt very recently in the face of tariffs. So what could the layoffs mean politically? Let's bring back the front bench. Brian Gallant, Lisa Ray, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. I mean, Brian, obviously we talked to the union earlier. The layoffs mean a whole lot to the families of people who will lose their jobs as of March. There's a lot of concern in the community that there isn't the ability to absorb those jobs at all. What did you think of that exchange in the House? Where does the government go on this?
It didn't feel like the government had any specifics to use to defend itself. Now, to be fair, they might have been scrambling a little bit to find out exactly how they're going to sort of communicate what they did and what they will do. Look, my sense is that there's a bit of 1,000 points of light here happening, in the sense that I think these individual bad news items for the economy, obviously not good, obviously not a good day from a political point of view for the government. Of course, I'm skipping over the not a good day for the workers, but I think that a lot of Canadians will say to themselves, look, we get it, there's a trade war, et cetera, et cetera. That said, 1,000 points of light, meaning that you can only have so many of these until the economy really starts to suffer, until the vast majority really start to feel it. And I think that's when the real kind of political shoe will drop. So it is, I think, something that the government has to be incredibly worrisome from a political point of view, worried about. And with that also, in this case, it looks a little murky on the type of support they had provided, and if that was the right type of support, if they protected taxpayers' money, if they actually did something that was going to help ensure the workers would be able to have their jobs. So I think that's another element, 1,000 points of light. That's another point for sure. Yeah, I think on this one, Benzie, like that sticks out to me, because there's for both governments, to be fair, Ontario and the federal government, right? Like there's a lifeline provided very recently through loans, but the union representative we had on spoke of other sort of financial incentives that the governments have put on the table, in which the union was kind of begging for there to be conditions attached, and it doesn't appear like there were any. And this is kind of a familiar refrain by now.
Yeah. Exactly, Vashi. This is a very similar situation to Stellantis and the car factory in Brampton, the Jeep factory there. And this speaks to the limits of what governments can and cannot do to save private industries. But it also speaks to the fact that governments need to really, really have ironclad agreements with these companies before we bail them out. We saw, they're threatening legal action against Stellantis over that, the fact that Jeep Compass is not going to be manufactured in Brampton anymore. As the union leader was saying to you, Vashi, this is there were more things that the government could have done to ensure that the $500 million or the $400 million in federal money and $100 million in provincial money went to protect the workers, not just the company. It's a very, very difficult situation. And Brian's right. Like the government they looked a little flat-footed, I thought, today. Melanie Joly did. But again, there are a lot of these, and there may be more coming, because Donald Trump has just caused absolute chaos on it for our economy.
Well, and I think this sort of speaks to like what Brian was saying, Tom, about it may not happen all at once, but there's the Stellantis story, the other car stories. Like this is, I mean, just last week, if we can remember, a few days ago, the Prime Minister was making announcements meant to help reinforce a turn to the domestic industry for steel, because they have completely lost the American market. And now this sort of they're confronted with this economic reality.
Exactly. And, because I was head of the NDP and we're very close to those unions, including the steelworkers, I know that factory. I've been there. I've met those workers. And it's heartbreaking. It really is truly heartbreaking to see so close to the holiday season, on top of everything else, people just being said, well, what are we going to do? Because these are good jobs. People are trained up to them and they're held on. These are lifetime jobs in many cases. And then just 1,000 families facing that. It's too much. I do think that the federal government actually got some parts of this right, because instead of handing out cash, a loan guarantee requires the company to use its own credit, but you're going to back them up on it. And I don't think that we had the time to build something where we could actually start giving grants, for example. And I think that overall it was probably the wisest course in a very rough sea, because you're trying to build something that's never been built before in response to something that's never happened to Canada before. The other thing was, of course, excluding steel from countries with which we don't have free trade agreements, essentially making it impossible for them to get into the Canadian market. We're hurting them, obviously, but we're being hurt so badly right now, and the proof of that is what just happened at Algoma. Yeah. I'm afraid that Brian's right. I'm afraid that this is the beginning of something, but there will be far more of these cases. There's an old saying that, you know, it's a recession when I lose, when my neighbor loses his job. It's a depression when I lose my job. Yeah. But what we're starting to see now is people going through that. And yeah, there have been tough times before. We've had 10% and 12% unemployment before in Canada. We know what this stuff looks like. But we've never had our closest neighbor intentionally harming our economy, which is what we're going through now. And I refer us back to our previous discussion. We've got to use what we've got, including our natural resources, which is this great blessing that we have in this country. Got to do it wisely, but we've got to do it quickly, because otherwise the entire economy could start to tank.
You see also the sort of disproportionate impact on the sectors that are being punished, right, that aren't covered by CUSMA, that have these 232 tariffs, like steel, like autos. Lisa, I heard you nodding when Tom said he'd been to the factory. Like, this is a third of the workforce in you know, an area where, as the union representative on, like, as I was saying, he said, like, the community cannot absorb this. There aren't enough open jobs there. Even the ones at the mines, he said, are getting overrun by applications right now. Like, that is very consequential.
It is, and I lived through it in the 80s in Cape Breton. We lost the coal mines, we lost the steel plant, we lost the cod fishery. The island has never, ever recovered, like ever recovered. And we've had multiple amounts of government programming going in there. And it's devastating to watch a town like Sault Ste. Marie go through the exact same thing. And this is where careless thoughts or careless words like, I don't care, from the Prime Minister is going to come back to haunt him, because those links are going to be made. They knew this was coming because we don't have a deal on steel. Loan guarantees are only helpful when the company knows they're actually going to have revenues to repay the loans. If you don't have revenues coming in, nobody's going to give you a loan, even if you have a government guarantee. That's what they're up against. And without having some kind of path forward on these steel tariffs, they're not going to have any kind of possibility of putting a business plan together to get the loans. So they need more. And I don't know what the government can possibly do. But I can tell you this, that whoever wrote those lines in question period today, they better go back to the drawing board, because they were completely unacceptable. To put the burden on the worker to have to chin up and get through it is ridiculous. This is a huge problem for our country. The Prime Minister has to stand up in the House and has to address it. This is the beginning, and people are scared, Vashi. This is going to be a crappy Christmas for a lot of people who are in these sectors in this country, because they're seeing the writing on the wall. And I just say, God bless you all. It's going to be tough.
For sure. Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it. Our front bench, Brian Gallant, Lisa Ray, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie.